Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for this month's edition of Office Hours. My name is Amanda Augustine and I'm the career advice expert for TopResume, the largest resume writing service in the world. Today, I don't know if you've gone to any of these other office hours before, but we've relocated. Check out my nice background. Today we are talking all about acing the interview. But before we get into that, let me give you a little background. Like I said, my name is Amanda Augustine. I am a certified professional career coach and resume writer. I've been in this industry for nearly 15 years now. And for the last few years, I've been working at TopResume. TopResume provides resume rewrites, LinkedIn profiles, thank you notes, cover letters. You need it for the job search, we probably offer some form of it. And I'm very excited to announce that we also have a sister brand, TopInterview.com. So if you decide you would like some one-on-one coaching to help you get out those interview jitters and really do a practice run before your next big interview, or you know there's an issue that you'd love some coaching to help you resolve that before your next interview, we can provide that. You can check us out at TopInterview.com. Now, thank you all for joining us. Here's how this is going to go down. I'm going to spend the first 20 or so minutes going through some basic tips on what you can do to prepare, to handle, and to follow up after the interview process. And then I'm going to open it up to Q&A. For anybody who's having trouble landing the interview in the first place, if you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out topresume.com, where you can request a free resume review. Totally free, objective feedback. We also show you what the computer sees when it scans your resume, which I think is really cool, so you know what you need to do to spruce up that resume and start landing those interviews. Again, my name's Amanda Augustine, here for TopResume.com, the largest resume writing service in the world, and we're here to talk about acing the interview. I think this is a really popular topic, and I'm really excited we're getting to speak about it today. For anyone who's been following my articles over the years, you know that I like to break the job search process down into three main phases. There's your prep, there's your search, and there's your close. It's very much like a sales funnel. Prep is all figuring out your job goals and setting up your marketing plan. Search is finding those job leads, and close is closing the deal. It's the interview process, the salary negotiation, and even the first 90 days of your new job, since I consider that to be an extension of the interview process. Now, when you think about it, the interview process can also be broken down into three main phases. There's what do you do before you enter that interview? What's the preparation for that? What happens the day of the main event? And then how do you follow up afterwards? And I have to say, what you do before and after that interview is equally important as what goes down in that interview room. So I definitely want to spend a bit of time talking about how you can properly prepare for an interview so you feel more confident going in the day of. And then what are some critical steps you need to take after that interview to ensure that your candidacy is still moving forward. Sound good? For anybody who just joined us, my name is Amanda Augustine. I'm a career advice expert for TopResume, the largest resume writing service in the world. And today we're talking about acing that interview. Again, if you decide that you would like some more help with interviewing after this office hours, you can always contact our sister company, TopInterview.com, where you can sign up to work one-on-one with a coach video chat in order to spruce up your interviewing skills and make sure you're ready for the big meeting. All right, so let's get down into it. As I mentioned, I break the interview process down into three main phases. Your preparation, everything you do before that interview, the day of, and then what do you do to follow up afterwards. So let's start with the prep part. And I have to say, there's a great quote out there, this guy named Miguel, I'm gonna look up the name so I don't destroy it, but his name is Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. Gotta love him, right? He says, the man who's prepared has half his battle fought. And I 100% agree. I think that really resonates for the interview as well. So if you prepare properly, you're already halfway there to making it to the next round of interviewing. And the preparation really is important. So a couple things to keep in mind, I'm going to go through a pretty long list of things that I suggest you do in order to 100% prepare for the interview. I will try not to talk too quickly, but I do want to get through a pretty large body of information in a pretty short amount of time. If you have any questions along the way, either you want me to answer during the Q&A part or a question about something I'm talking about right now, please feel free to submit your questions in the comments section underneath this live chat. So definitely, we want to hear your questions. I'm going to provide as much information as I can, and basically any question within reason, is fair game. So let's start with the preparation. The first step that I'd recommend is researching the company. And there's a few different ways you can go about that. If you have enough time, enough notice of when you're going to go in for this interview, so say you have 3 to 4 days and it's not the very next day, set up a Google News alert. Run a Google search, or you can Google News alert, and it will take you to a page where you can set up a search specifically for the name of the company, a specific term related to the industry, or even that company's competitors, and ask it to send you alerts every time those words are mentioned in news articles. That's a great way to keep in touch with what's going on. So if something comes out the morning of your interview or the day before about that company, you'll be able to look at that. I also recommend checking out Yahoo Finance. You can get some background, specifically if it's a public company. I mean, a good old Google search can get you some good information. Hoover's is also really great. It's a D&B company, and you can get some information for free there. Definitely check out the company's website. Look at what they're calling, what's their mission, what is their social media presence like, and also what are the social media channels they're using specifically for recruiting purposes. These days, companies are much more transparent when it comes to this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is how we treat our employees. Doing that research is going to help you understand how should I dress the day of that interview, what's important to them, and where are they going with their business. I think it's really important to understand, are there trends in the industry that maybe you want to bring up or ask them about? So this is a great way to do some reconnaissance. Things that you want to keep in mind when you're researching the company. Part of it is to prepare yourself so you can field questions and really be in the know when you're talking to them about their industry and their space. But also you're trying to look and see, is this company stable? Has there been a lot of changes in leadership recently? Are they expanding? Are they downsizing? It gives you an indication, is this a company you truly want to work for? What do they tend to value? Where is their name being mentioned in the news and in what context? These are all things you want to be aware of. Something I like to repeat over and over and over again is that interviewing is a two-way street. I know it always feels like it's an interrogation and you're there to put on this fabulous show for them and get them to like you, but honestly, you have to make sure you want to work for this company too. You don't want to be looking for a job in another 6 months or even another 12 months, hopefully, right? You'd like this to be a really great place to work. I say this about the job search all the time. If you're in a job that you really hate, make sure the next job you go to is a job that you truly want to work for. Don't run away from the bad job. Run towards a really good one because you don't want to be searching again. So again, take your time and be sure to evaluate this organization to make sure it's going to be a good fit for you and that it's stable so you will not have to go through this roller coaster of a process in 6 to 12 months time. All right, so we've talked about researching the company. For anyone who's just joined us, my name is Amanda Augustine. I'm a certified professional career coach and resume writer, and I'm the career advice expert for TopResume, the largest resume writing service in the world. We also have our sister company, Top Interview, and you can visit topresume.com to have your resume critiqued for free. And if you're looking for more interview advice and perhaps some coaching, you can go to topinterview.com. We're talking about what you do before you get into the interview and how can you prepare so you feel really confident going in. After you've researched the company, you want to go back and really take a second look at the role. So take that job description back out. And for anybody who's maybe not necessarily interviewing yet, I strongly recommend when you apply to a job, don't just save the link to that job somewhere, because often those links go away and the job gets pulled. Take a screenshot of the job listing, take a picture of it on your phone, copy and paste the information into a Google Doc or a Word doc. Make sure you have a copy of the actual job description, because if someone does call you in for an interview, you want to know which job are they calling you about, and you don't necessarily want to have to ask them for a copy of the job listing. So when you're researching the role, take a step back and look at that job description again. Oftentimes a job listing or a job posting is this laundry list of everything they could possibly want in a candidate. And you really have to sit there and do a little detective work and understand, what do you think they're really looking for? When it comes down to the must-have core qualities, both the softer skills as well as the technical skills, what are they looking for? If you had a phone screen with somebody before sitting down for the face-to-face interview, what did they tend to drill you on? What did they care most about? What did they want to hear about when it came to your experience? What skills were they trying to confirm you truly possessed? Those will give you really good clues into what are they looking for, and how can you start thinking about positioning your skills as the answer to their needs. So that's a really good one to have. Also, if you know anybody who works at the company, previously worked at the company, you definitely want to reach out to them sooner rather than later. Even if you can get 10 minutes on the phone with them, just to get a better understanding of what their interview process is like, what the companies truly like to work for, and if they have any insider tips on how to navigate their interview process, or if they have any information they can share on the people you will be interviewing with. Whenever possible, who's ever setting up your interview, ask them if they could provide a list of the people you will be interviewing with or you might be interviewing with. That way you can look them up on LinkedIn, you can Google their names, you can get a sense of, are these people thought leaders? What's their role? And try and figure out why they would be involved in that interview process, so you're better equipped. So we covered a lot about, what you should be researching and what you should be looking into to understand a better sense of, what is this company looking for in an employee in general, based on their mission statement and their core values and their company culture, and then also specifically what the role is looking for. And the idea is you want to use all that information to practice how you want to pitch yourself to this company. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the elevator pitch is the worst term ever. Who stands in an elevator and pitches themselves, really? But there is something to that. How in a very short amount of time can you clearly and successfully communicate the value that you bring to the table? And when they ask you that dreaded question, so tell me about yourself, what they're really asking for is, give me your elevator pitch, or hey, why should we hire you? Again, it's about giving your elevator pitch. But it's not just giving some standard pitch you've put together. It's thinking back about, what are they looking for in employees? What are they looking for in this position? And how can you tell a very short story in a few minutes about how you got to where you are in your career, and what experiences you've had, what have you learned, and what are you really excited and interested about that makes you such a great fit for this type of role that you're going after today. So keep that in mind. When someone says, tell me about yourself, what they really want to know is, tell me about your history and how it's led you up to this role today and the decision that you want to go after this type of job. Something else I want you to consider is that you're probably going to have to pitch your skills, right? That's the whole part. Oftentimes you're asked what's called behavioral-based questions, or behavior interview questions. Everybody hates them. They normally start off with, tell me about a time. And you're expected to spin some story very eloquently, and oftentimes you feel like it's on the spot, on the fly, and you're not prepared. Well, we're still in that preparation phase of the interview process. Again, look back at that job description and think about, what do they care about? What are the skill sets that they're going to expect you to use, and use quite frequently in this type of job? already start brainstorming a list of experiences in the past where either you had to deal with a situation or you had to handle some sort of task where you had to demonstrate that skill set. It's called the STAR method. That's the framework for answering these behavioral-based questions. Think of a situation, S, or a task, where you had to leverage that skill set, handle a major situation. Sometimes it's tell me about a time when you had 2 competing deadlines and how did you make that work? Or, tell me about a time where you had to work with somebody that you really didn't mesh well with, but you had to make that project happen. Oftentimes you can figure out where these questions might come from, again, by looking at the job description. So use that information to say, okay, when have I experienced a situation where I've demonstrated that? Then think about what were the actions that you took in order to resolve the issue, take care of the task, remedy the solution, whatever it is. And then what are the results? How did you solve it? What happened? What did you learn? What was the outcome? If you can take a few different situations, just take a piece of paper, write STAR and say, okay, situation, task, actions, results. You can brainstorm, and again, I don't recommend writing out paragraphs of responses. You don't want to sound rehearsed when you're in an interview. Instead, jot down some bullet points, a few words that will trigger your memory. You can practice saying the information different ways, but you just want a framework, something to jog your memory so that when you're put on the spot, you're not thinking of something on the fly. So that's a lot about, again, practice. I want to get back to there are some other things that I'd like you to research. Again, my name is Amanda Augustine. I am the career advice expert for TopResume, and today we're talking all about how to ace that interview. So right now we're still talking about the prep phase, and there are a million things you need to research, pull together, get yourself prepared for the interview process. We talked about researching the company, both for its stability, what's going on in the news, and also what's that culture like. We talked about taking a much closer look at that role and really identifying what does the employer care most about in the person who lands this job so that you can prepare to answer some of those more behavioral-based questions where you can position your skill set and your experience as the solution to their needs. Now we're going to talk about the researching the salary, because although it's the worst question ever and everyone hates getting it, and I might add, in the city of New York, the city of Philadelphia, and the state of Massachusetts, it's now illegal to ask you for your previous salary. There are many, many, many other places around the country where you're going to be asked, what were you making most recently? And what are you looking for in this job? What's your target compensation? So I want you to be prepared for those conversations. You want to make sure that you've actually researched the market rate. So what does the market bear? What are they currently paying for that type of role? And there are a number of different resources you can use. I recommend salary.com, payscale.com, Glassdoor, as well as Vault, V-A-U-L-T. Check out all 4 of those because you do want to look at a number of different sources so you can get a really accurate picture. But you want to look for roles that are very similar to what you're doing now or what you're looking to do in the same city where you're interviewing for the job, in a company size that's relative to this employer, the location's similar, the industry's similar, and the number of years experience are similar to your relevant number of years of experience. So take all those factors into account and get a sense of what's the bell curve, what's the range that's usually associated with this type of position in this type of industry, in this type of location, company size, et cetera, and so forth. It's so much better to come into the interview and they say, what are you looking for? And you say, well, based on my research online, it looks like the average range for this role is around this number. I'm looking for something around that area, but I'm open to negotiation. And of course, I would love to learn more about the role before I give you a very specific number. So you want to be prepared with a number in mind, but you do want to try and dodge the question a little bit if possible, or at least leave the door open, with the big caveat that, hey, I'm open to discussion, but really I'd like to learn more about this job and understand how I could provide value before I give you a more concrete number. They just want to know that you're not well over their price range, because then they think it's not worth their time. So even when you're looking at that range of salaries, if it's just a phone screen, I recommend actually putting something out there that's kind of on the lower end of that scale, because you just want to get in the door. And once you start really talking to the person and building rapport and demonstrating the value that you bring to the table, it's much easier to negotiate that number higher. All right, so we talked about researching the market rate. I mentioned it briefly about the company culture. I want to emphasize it again because I think it's so important. Have you ever heard of Pareto's rule, the 80-20 rule? It applies in interviewing as well. Basically, if you get past that initial phone screen and you're onto a face-to-face interview, only about 20% of that face-to-face interview is typically spent verifying that you have the skill set to do the job. The remaining 80% is spent confirming that you're going to be a good fit on the team, that you're going to jive well with the other people you'll be working with, that you have the right leadership style or communication style, but it's some of those softer skills. They just want to make sure that you're going to succeed if you get this job, because you could have the perfect skill set. You could be on paper the best fit for this role, but if you don't mesh well with that team, if your personalities clash wildly, it's not going to work out for anyone. And this is as important for you as it is for the employer. The employer cares because they don't want to look for another candidate after they've hired someone. Hiring somebody is expensive and it takes time. They don't want to do this a second time. And we all know you don't want to be doing this a second time either. So I think it's really important that you investigate that corporate culture and get a sense of what they're about to ensure that it's going to be a good fit for you. So there are a few things you can do. Obviously, if you know anybody who works at the company, previously worked at the company, reach out to them. Get them on the phone, 10-minute conversation, face-to-face, whatever you can get. See if you can get some insider information from them on what it's really like to work there and if they think it would be a good fit for you. This is also why employee referrals are so hot in the recruiting industry, that employee referrals are still the #1 source of hires who actually ends up making it in to the company. Because if you're referred by someone, the assumption is that that person's probably already kind of vetted you for that cultural fit. They wouldn't be recommending you for the role if they didn't think you'd work well at that company and enjoy that environment. So something to keep in mind. Also, look on their social media pages, particularly the ones they use for recruiting. That will give you a sense of who they are. If you have the time, this is one of my favorite tricks. Find the coffee shop or the watering hole around the corner from the office and stake it out. See who's going. Chances are that, a bunch of people on a Thursday, Friday night are going for a drink after work, or go during the morning time when everyone's grabbing their cup of coffee at the coffee shop. Just see, be a fly on the wall and see who's coming and going that works at that company, so you can get a better sense of how they dress and what they're saying, and a bit more of an understanding of what this culture might be like. I love the drive-by. If you have the time, it's really helpful because you can also figure out how long will it take you to get to your interview. You can kind of do a test run, to see how long it's going to take you to get there. But also you can get a real sense of, who works there and what's the culture like. So it's a nice little insider look. Other places, of course, Vault is really good. Again, VAULT, Glassdoor. There's another site called Career Bliss, CAREERBLISS. These are all sites where there are employee reviews, so you can get a better sense. The one thing I'll always say is take the employee reviews with a grain of salt, because let's be honest, you're more likely to go on a board and complain about a company than you are to go on a board and say, I really enjoy working here, unless there was some incentive by HR. So again, take all the reviews with a grain of salt, but it is something to go by at least. All right, so we've talked about all this research that you can be doing to get a better understanding of the company you're going to be meeting with, the role that they're trying to fill, the company culture you may be coming into, and even potentially how you might want to pitch yourself based on what their needs are. The other thing that's really important to prepare is a list of questions that you can ask that employer. And I really like to prepare a pretty comprehensive list. You can bring in a list of questions with you into the interview. It shows that you've done your homework, that you truly care. That's a nice thing to have. Not to mention, you never, ever, ever, if they ask you, do you have any questions for me, ever want to say no. You always need at least one question. I don't care if it's the first person who's interviewing you or the 5th person who's interviewing you that day. You have to have some questions to ask every single person. You never want to say, no, I think everybody's already answered everything. What I do recommend is having a couple questions that you can use that you could ask absolutely everybody. And there's a couple things. One, you're always prepared. You always have a question for everyone. But 2, it's actually interesting to see how different people answer the question differently. So for instance, if you asked every person you meet with, what would you say are the 3 most important qualities the person who lands this job should possess? And if everybody's got wildly different answers, that's probably a big red flag that they are not all synced up and they're not exactly sure what they want in a candidate. And so that's something for you to consider. Or ask them, if you would describe this company culture, this company's culture in 3 words, what would it be? Or what would I not learn about this company through the website? Or, how long have you worked at this organization? And, what keeps you coming back every day? What do you enjoy most about working here? Those are questions that you can have them and you could ask every single person that you meet with, and they're all going to give you different answers, but it will give you a much better understanding of what situation you may or may not be walking into. So prepare a list of questions for sure. I always recommend having a few that are specific around the company culture. It's many of what I just mentioned now. Some other questions I'd recommend having out there are, to the hiring manager, the person you'd be working with is, if you were to land the job, asking them, if I were to land the job, what's the one thing you'd want me to accomplish in the first 6 months that I work there? What are the top 3 things you'd want me to focus on, within the first 6 to 12 months I worked at this organization? That gives you a sense of where are their pain points, and it will help you also figure out how to position your experience as the solution to their needs. Anytime they're filling a role, remember, if they're filling a position, it's because there's a pain point or there's a need of some sort. And you're there to explain how you could be that solution. You could, resolve that pain point for them or fill that need. If you're just joining us, my name's Amanda Augustine. I am the career advice expert for TopResume. You can visit TopResume at any time to request a free resume review. And if after watching this office hours, you decide that you would like a little bit more help with your interview practice, you can visit our sister site, topinterview.com, at any time, and you can request to work with one of our interview coaches to practice mock trials, triage a specific issue that you're tackling with your interviews. There's a lot of great help out there, so definitely check it out. And today we are talking about acing the interview. So we've talked a lot about preparation. I just talked about some of the questions you might want to prepare ahead of time. I also recommend having at least one question that's targeted towards what have you read about them, whether it's on their company blog, where they've been mentioned in the news, but understanding what's going on in their industry, showing that you've done your homework on them. So ask something that you wouldn't just find or isn't just a standard canned question. Try and come up with at least one question that's very pointed and very specific to the organization or the industry. That's always going to win you brownie points. The other question that I always like to ask is, and this is typically to the hiring manager, so it's the person who'd be managing you, but asking them, what are your goals for the next 6 to 12 months, and how would my role help you achieve those? What would I be doing, or what could I be doing if hired to help you achieve those goals? It makes you look good, let's be honest, because you're thinking that far ahead. You're already putting it into their minds that you're going to be the one they hire, and you're also looking into how your role feeds into the larger corporate goals and the corporate mission, which is always a good thing. So in addition to preparing your list of questions that you're going to ask, it's time to really think about what questions they may be asking you. And I already talked a little bit about, okay, we've looked at the job description, we've thought about what are some of those behavioral-based questions they might ask you that will really be kind of testing some of the harder and softer skills you possess. But then we all know those questions that you've received in the past that you always choke on. Tell me about yourself. What's your greatest weakness? Why should we hire you? You know those questions. I don't have to list them all out. Everyone always has that one question. They're like, oh, please don't ask me that. Please don't ask me that. And we know if that's the way you feel about it, you know they're going to ask you that question. And so this is the time where you can figure out, how do you want to answer those certain questions? I truly believe there's not the right answer to a lot of interview questions out there. It's not like you can research it and say, oh, this is exactly what I'm supposed to say if I want the job. Because every employer is different. Everybody's looking for something different in their candidates. There's no way to say this is exactly what they want. But what they are looking for is some understanding and insight into who you are and how you operate. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. What do you know about the company values? What do you know about the job and what they're looking for based on what you've researched ahead of time and what you learn as you're talking to them and their responses to your questions? And think about it, before you answer any question, you want to think about that question with the filter that it's applying to this job and this company. So again, if they say, tell me about yourself, no, they don't want to know about your family and your kids and that you love yoga on the weekends and that you're a foodie at night. Yeah, there may be some of that chit chat in the beginning, the small talk, they want to learn about you. But when they say, tell me about yourself, that's your opportunity to give them your elevator pitch. And it's really about, how do you talk about your experience? How do you talk about the things you've done and that have led you to this moment and to this type of job? Really think about filtering your response based on what you know about what they're looking for in the job. It's not lying, it's thinking about how you want to position your skills based on what you know about what they're looking for. I mentioned this earlier, I'll mention it again. I truly don't believe in writing out a paragraph as your response and then trying to memorize it. If the way you study is that you have to write something out and kind of brainstorm, that's fine. But what I recommend at the end of the day, the only thing you're really trying to memorize are a couple words. I normally say 3 bullets, 3 bullet points, 3 to 5 words max. Little things that will jog your memory and remind you, where do you want to get at when you're answering this question? Ultimately, where are you trying to arrive at the end of that response? Something else I'll recommend that I think is really important is that recruiters especially, and some hiring managers, are really good at what we call the pregnant pause. They ask you a question, you give your answer, and then there's this. And sometimes the recruiter is typing on their computer, and sometimes they're kind of looking at a piece of paper, and there's this really awful, awkward silence. And what do most people do when there's a really awful, awkward silence? We start talking. We start trying to fill that space as quickly as possible. And we normally ramble, and we provide a lot of extra information that we truly were not trying to provide. Don't fall for the trick of the pregnant pause. That's purposely done because most interviewers know you're going to prepare for your interview, and you know what you want to say, and you've kind of crafted out in your head the answer you're going to give them, and it sounds very PC, and it's very, very filtered. And now they're giving you some space because they're hoping you'll start rambling and really say what's on your mind so they can get some true insight into who you are. I'm not saying that you should be disingenuous, but don't start rambling. You want to avoid, just sit quietly. And if they're kind of looking at you, the best thing you can do is say, did that answer your question? Is there anything else I can provide? That is the best way to respond and get rid of that pregnant pause so things don't feel awkward anymore. It's a common technique. Also, if you find that you're one of those people who tends to ramble, or you've been told that you tend to get off track and you're not sure if you've answered their question, I recommend after every response you give it a moment. See if they respond back or ask more questions or go to another topic, but just to ask. Did that answer your question? That's all you have to ask. So keep that in mind. It's a little trick. That's also really helpful, if you find that you do a lot of this and you need to keep yourself busy, hands on your knees, hands on the table. Did that answer your question? It's just one thing to keep the momentum going. Even better is if you can come up with a question to ask back to them beyond the, did that answer your question? So you start a dialogue as opposed to just simply, they ask a question, you answer. They ask a question, you answer. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how you prepare, and I think we beat that dead horse. There's a lot of stuff you can do. Other things to keep in mind: plan out the outfit ahead of time. Think about the company culture. If it's a startup, you shouldn't be wearing a buttoned-up suit. It's probably not appropriate. I always recommend looking at their pages to see how they're dressing and figure out how do you think they would dress if they were dressing up for an important meeting. So they may all be in, super casual clothes. In some places, dark jeans, nice shoes, and if you're a gentleman, a blazer and a button down is the way to go, or a t-shirt. For women, it could be, the heels, the nice dark jeans, a nice blouse and a blazer. That might be the way to go, or a dress. You always want to think that they may be the most casual company in the world where you could show up in sweatpants and nobody would care if you worked there. That doesn't fly when you're interviewing. You still have to look professional. The idea is you want to look like you already belong there, but consider it one step up. So that's a good way to think about it. Always try on the outfit in advance. Make sure it fits. Make sure the shoes are shined. Make sure everything's put together. There are all those little details. There are all little things that you can take care of ahead of time. So I think we've done everything that has to do with really beforehand. Again, my name's Amanda Augustine. I'm the career advice expert for TopResume, the largest resume writing service in the world, and we're here talking about acing that interview. We just went through all the steps you can do in order to prepare for an interview so you feel very confident walking in. Now we're going to talk about certain things you could think about the day of the interview. My word of advice is the moment you wake up, think the interview started. You got to get in that mindset immediately. So if you wake up in an awful mood and everything's going wrong, you need to figure out what you need to do to get yourself in a positive mindset. Tony Robbins always says, change your state, change your mind. I know a lot of people who, before they get on a phone interview, they jump up and down with their hands above their head because they need to get their energy level up for that phone call. Or, if it's going for a run or jamming to some music or whatever you need to do to get in the zone and be ready with your game face on and that optimism before you go into that interview, do it. Figure it out. And that might be the night before, that might be day of. But do whatever you need to do to release the stress and to try and work out some of those nervous jitters. When you go into the interview, also assume everybody you meet that day could be part of the interview process. I kid you not, I know another coach who was coaching a client. That client was on the highway driving to their interview, cut someone off, flipped them off, got to the interview. Wouldn't you know, that was the hiring manager. I swear I'm not making this one up. I mean, you don't know anybody from the receptionist at the desk when you first enter to the person you're on the elevator with to somebody that you're commuting next to could work for that company. So treat everyone like they're the interviewer. Zappos was very well known for this, that, if you were an out-of-towner coming in for an interview, the bus that picked you up at the airport to take you to the corporate office was part of the interview process. They had to provide a report on how you behaved and how you treated them on your way to the office. So just keep in mind, just assume you're on the moment you walk out your door that morning. Something definitely to keep in mind. I like to think of when you approach the interview and you get in there are two mindsets to take. One is the politician. So you know what your talking points are. We've done all this research. You have a good sense of, what are they looking for in a candidate. So you know the certain things you want to keep addressing and bringing up and demonstrating about yourself and your qualifications and your experience. Have those 3 to 5 talking points. Those are the things that you always kind of want to bring the conversation back around to, right? Answer their question, but bring the conversation back. You've seen the politician, they're like, sir, is it true that you were talking to the underage woman? They're like, that's an excellent point. We should always take care of our people. They always turn the conversation. Again, this is, of course, a huge exaggeration and not exactly relevant to what we're talking about. But think about it. When they start asking questions, if it starts going off script or going way in a different direction, and you want to kind of bring it back around home because you want to keep hitting upon what you can offer to them. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the interview process is a two-way street. They're interviewing you and evaluating you to see if you'd be a good fit for their organization and for that specific role. But you're also interviewing them to get a better sense of what are their needs, what are they truly looking for, and do you truly want to be there in the first place? Is this a job that leverages the skill sets you want to use? Is this a job that makes sense given your career path? So not only approach the interview like a politician, but approach the interview as if you were a consultant. What if you were going in there and you're gathering facts to have a better understanding of what they're trying to solve for so that you can position your skills appropriately? Think of it that way. As an interview, you're also going in there with the mindset of a consultant. And above all, show your passion. The number one mistake that interviewers say that candidates make is that they forget to ask for the job. And you sit there and go, what does that mean? Well, one is that you get so concerned and nervous about answering the questions and remembering what you wanted to say and, fielding their questions that you actually forget to, demonstrate that you truly want the job. Some people get so nervous they kind of clam up, and you want to remain open and you want to show that you're engaged. You want to nod when they're talking, you want to smile, and you want to make sure that if they're asking you why you want this job, that you have some reason, whatever it may be, whether it's you've always wanted to work for this company, or it's the type of work you get to do, or it's the organization's mission, or you got to find some aspect of that job that really resonates with you and use that to your advantage to demonstrate some genuine passion and interest in the role. I get that some jobs are just jobs, but you have to find something about that opportunity, and it can't just be the paycheck. It can't just be the vacation policy. Find something about that role that really resonates with you and demonstrate that you're excited about it. All right, I've talked a lot, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. In terms of, I'm going to very quickly say, in terms of interview follow-up, we just did a survey and we found that 68% of hiring managers and recruiters say the thank you note or lack thereof does matter and make a difference in their hiring decisions. And in fact, somewhere between 16 and 17% said they have actually dismissed a candidate directly because of their thank you note or lack thereof. So if you're not following up with every person you speak with or meet with in person in the interview process, you are doing a very big disservice to your candidacy. So make sure you're sending that follow-up and that you're using it to your advantage to not only reassure them that you're very interested in the role, but to reiterate why you're a good fit for the position. And if there were any objections you uncovered along the way, make sure you're also using this time to explain or overcome those objections. I've talked a lot. I'm hoping that there's someone out there that may have some questions for me specifically about the interview process. Jenna, do we have some?
Yes. So Laquita has a phone interview tomorrow morning for a large healthcare company, and she wants to know if you have any points or tips or do's or don'ts for a phone interview.
Love it, love it. Okay, so what do you do for a phone interview? First, make sure you have a quiet place to actually have the call. I know nobody has landlines anymore. I'd say do a landline because then you don't have to worry about cell service and all that funness, but I know very few people have landlines anymore. So instead, just make sure you have a spot where your phone works very well. You won't be distracted. They're going to be able to hear you. Second, and I know it sounds silly, but when they can't see you, you still have to demonstrate that level of enthusiasm and positive energy. And so I truly recommend before you get on that call, put your phone down. Obviously, this is not after you've answered the call. This is right before. But, jump up and down, hop around, put your arms in the air, but get your energy level up. Something I recommend, whether it's a phone interview, a video interview, or face-to-face, I recommend cutting your caffeine in half that day. You need your caffeine, I get that, but try and lower the dosage a little bit because you'll already be amped up because of the interview, so you don't want to come across too hyper. You can also eat almonds, bananas, anything that's a natural beta blocker that will also help keep you calm. The great thing about a phone interview is that you can have your notes. You can sit there and have an entire set of notes in front of you. You can have the few bullet points that you want to mention and have them prepared. Have those questions that you want to ask them. A phone screen is a very high level where they want to confirm certain parts of your experience, confirm that you have the right skill set for the role, and they're probably going to ask you, what are you looking to make? So I definitely recommend doing the research on the going rate for that opportunity. Check Glassdoor to see if that company's listed their salaries or have employees that have listed their salaries. That is the benefit of a large company like the one you're speaking with. There's probably some data out there that you can look at and figure out what that price range is, because I guarantee they're going to push you for a number of some sort when you're on the phone, and you can kind of dodge it once or twice, but chances are they're going to nail you down and say, no, you have to give me a number. What's the number? And so look at that range, say based on your research, you found a number around here. Again, I always recommend a little lower in that range because you just want to get your foot through the door. You can always change your mind and have that conversation open once you've made it to the face-to-face and they're truly interested in you. Always ask them at the end of the interview, what are the next steps? Is there anything else you would like to know about me or that I could send you? When can I follow up? When should I expect to hear from you? Always make sure you know what's coming next after that phone interview. Definitely send a thank you. Most people say, oh, it was a phone screen. No, still send a thank you. A little, make sure you get their contact information if you don't have it from when they scheduled. They catch you off guard. And always have a couple questions prepared. And these are higher level. Chances are whoever's phone screening you is not the hiring manager. It might not even be like a senior recruiter who has a true sense of what you do. It's somebody who's doing an initial screen. So think about that before, when you're formulating your questions. But definitely have your resume available. Make sure you're using the same version that you've used when you submitted the job, since you know that's what they're looking at. But above all, just you got to be in the confidence, and you can't read them over the phone as well, so you will have to every once in a while be like, does that make sense? Did I answer your question? So that you know that they have the right information.
Okay, let's see. We have a question from Kate. She would like to know if handwritten notes are a thing of the past, or is email acceptable?
So Kate's asking, I'm assuming this is for the thank you follow-up kind of note. Are handwritten notes a thing of the past? Is email okay? Love this question. I always say think about the company and the company culture. So, if you're speaking to a startup, chances are they want immediacy, right? Everybody gets everything immediately. We have our phones next to us at all times. You all have your phone next to you right now, or you're watching me through your phone. So we know they're always available. I recommend with every company, you send an email, and then you decide which companies you also want to follow up with a handwritten note. I'm one of those people who kind of likes to send both, and I change what I'm including in each of those messages, based on the format, because to your point, so few people are writing handwritten notes that you tend to stand out, but it also takes a few days for that to reach the person. So you do your email, within 24 hours of having the interview, and then you put your note in the mail, a day later. It kind of keeps your candidacy top of mind. But also really give it a second thought before you're going to send the handwritten note, I get. And again, it's a handwritten note. It's the size of a thank you note. What fits on that little section of a thank you note, that's as much information as you provide. Do not write a novel. Do not cram it all in there. I think the email is a better spot to address objections and provide a bit more color. You can hyperlink to things, you can attach things, if you need to provide a sample of your work and that sort of thing. And the handwritten thank you note is much more of a thank you. I really appreciated meeting you and learning about X, Y, and Z. I am genuinely interested in the role and am excited to hear about the next steps. So the handwritten note is much quicker, simpler, much more of just a thank you, where you can really leverage the email. And again, we're not writing a novel on the email either, but the email is an opportunity where you can be a bit more comprehensive in your thank you. And we actually have a bunch of articles on this. So if you do go to topresume.com and click on the career advice the career advice icon at the top of the screen, you can get to our blog. If you search for thank you or post-interview thank you, there are actually a bunch of articles. I wrote one specifically on thank you note do's and don'ts that really goes over kind of the length, the format, all those sorts of things.
Let's see, Kathleen has a great question regarding the thank you note as well.
Okay.
What timeline do you suggest it be sent along? Immediately, the next morning? When you know that they're going to be interviewing additional candidates, when should you get back on their radar?
That's a great question, Kathleen. So when do you send the thank you? Let's assume we're talking about the email because it is the most popular format these days. It's the most acceptable format these days. Again, I think the handwritten thing is fun depending on the company because it does set you apart and, it's another opportunity to remind them of you and your candidacy. When it comes to the email, I wouldn't leave the interview and start typing it on your phone on your way out and send it right away. The interview process is actually very similar to the dating process, right? You want to be confident, but not arrogant. You want to be genuinely interested and eager, but you don't want to appear needy, right? There's this fine line you got to walk. And so I think I wouldn't do it the second you walk out the door. If your interview was in the morning, I think you could send it that evening, but normally I would say within 24 hours, you want to get that note out the door. That's the expectation these days. Not one business day. If you have that interview on a Friday, do not wait till Monday to send that thank you.
So switching gears a little bit, Tasha had a question about the resume.
Okay.
She was interested to know how far back you should go on your resume with regards to your experience.
Okay, great question. So talking about resumes, how far should you go back? If you are applying to a traditional corporate job, as in you're not applying for the federal government and you're not necessarily, overseas and using a CV as opposed to a resume, you typically go back no farther than 15 years. Because honestly, yes, you may have done some really amazing things 16, 20 years ago, but most people are gonna say, okay, but what have you been doing now? What have you been doing most recently? They actually care, what have you been doing in the last 3 years that's most relevant to the job at hand? So something that's beyond 15 years, they're not going to care about. So cut it off at the 15-year mark. There should typically be more detail, more information about the most recent roles, and it starts, getting less and less as you go further back in time. If there is some interesting information, either, names you want to drop that are important in your industry because of clients you had or the company you worked for, and you want to work that into your resume, even if it's beyond the 15-year mark, there are 2 ways to handle it. You can have a section after your professional history that says earlier career experience, and you can just list the title, the company name, and the location, and just jot them down so you can show your career progression. Or you can include a small note that just says career note and says additional previous experience includes work as a blank at this company, and you can summarize it however you want, but you want to do very short, additional details available upon request. And that's how you can kind of get a nod to what you were doing in the past. If there's a name you really want to drop and get there on your resume because you think it will, catch someone's eye, that's the best way to go about it. But don't include the dates. Just give them the gist of, the role you held. Same thing for your education. Definitely list your credentials, but if you earned that degree outside of that 15-year window, just don't put the dates on.
So it looks like we have time for one last question.
Okay.
John asks, is it okay or acceptable to have notes at an interview?
Is it okay or acceptable to have notes at an interview? You can have notes in the sense that you have a list of questions prepared. It shows that you did your homework, and I think that's actually very attractive. People want to interview someone who's obviously prepared because it shows that you care, that you truly want the job. When all things are the same, the person who shows a genuine interest or passion for the role is going to be the one who lands the job. So yeah, you can definitely have notes. You cannot have notes on how you want to answer your questions though. You can't have, the bullet points as to how you want to answer certain questions. You can have notes that you've taken about the company that you want to reference to ask them a question, and you can certainly have a list of questions prepared to ask them. Also, I recommend asking at the beginning of the interview if they mind if you take notes. So if they say things that are of interest that you think you want to remember for later or bring up in conversation or ask them a question about, you want to be able to jot some notes down, whether that's with a piece of paper and a pen, or depending on the environment you're at, it's an iPad. You got to check, it's a gut check on what type of company are you dealing with. So notes are okay as long as it's a list of questions. You can't have cliff notes as to what you want to say to them. And it's definitely okay to ask to take notes, and you'll have to see how they feel about that. Do I have time for one more, Jenna, or no?
Sure, one more. So Paul wants to comment that he's overseas and he got a video interview back home. It's a panel interview, and saw that he was on their big screen, and he felt like he was a TV correspondent, which felt great. But what are the advantages or disadvantages if the CEO or VP of the company is the one leading the interview with a panel?
Oh, okay, I hate panel interviews. I think they're the worst thing in the world. So Paul, thumbs up, good for you, because buddy, I think they're so challenging. Those are definitely more nerve-wracking, right? When you're in front of a bunch of people, I understand that. There are definitely advantages if an executive is leading the conversation, because I would assume you're probably in a pretty senior role, or it's a very small company, more startup-y, where the senior execs want a hand in selecting everybody who joins his or her company. So I think there's definitely an advantage or something that'll pat your back, because you have the ears and eyes of the CEO or of an executive for your department. That's a great thing. I think you'd want to use the time to your best advantage. So I'm assuming, or I'm hoping you knew ahead of time that person would be on that video chat. And if they are the one leading the discussion, do your research on what you can find out about them. Luckily, not every hiring manager has a robust LinkedIn profile and a great bio on the site for you to read, but the executives usually do. So at least you can gather a bit more intel and get a better sense of, like, is this their baby? Have they been working on this since they were, for the last 10 years? What do you know about their story? Not that you want to sit there and pander to their ego the whole time, but it will give you some sense of, there's probably more information about them, about their interview style, what they care about. And so you want to use that to your advantage, because any intel you have that can help you position your answers a certain way, or ask certain questions that you don't think necessarily a manager would be able to answer, you have that opportunity.
I think that's all we have time for today.
Okay. Thank you guys all for coming and joining me for today's office hours. Again, my name is Amanda Augustine. I'm a career advice expert for TopResume, the largest resume writing service in the world. And if you have more questions, there are a few different things you can do. Can you see me better now? All right, there are a few things you can do. One, you can go to TopResume, click on career advice. We have a bunch of articles about interviewing. You can hit that drop-down menu and check that out. If you have another question that I wasn't able to get to, you can go to the event page on Facebook for this event. If you comment and put your question there, I will try and answer it in one of my next Ask Amandas. It's a regular column I have where I answer questions. And then, of course, if you would like some coaching one-on-one to either go through a mock interview or really have someone help you address a certain concern, go to our sister site, topinterview.com, and learn about our different coaching services. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.